Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome9 webinar this morning, Active Protection for the Cloud, Why It Matters, and How to Achieve It. We're going to give people a few more minutes to join and put you on standby. Give us a few minutes. We'll be right back. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome9 webinar, Active Protection for the Cloud, Why It Matters, and How to Achieve It. My name is Ellen Blum. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Dome9, and I'm here with Alex Korstorfen, Solutions Architect for Dome9 Security. Your cloud is as strong as its weakest link, an open port. There are stories that proliferate the media on a weekly basis about S3 buckets left open that span industries exposing private customer information to anyone that wants it. Your cloud security needs to be always on to protect your data. It only takes one strike to bring down an entire organization. In this webinar, Alex will introduce you to tools inherent in the Dome9 Arc platform that combine the power of deep visualization with active protection to provide always-on security enforcement for your multi-cloud environment. These tools include Tamper Protection, which automatically reverts unauthorized modifications to the last known approved state, Region Lock, which prevents changes to security groups made outside the Dome9 console, Dynamic Access Leases for time-limited, on-demand access to ports and services with a closed-by-default security posture, and IAM Safety for granular control over users, roles, and actions with multi-factor authentication and audit tamper protection. We will close with Q&A at the end of the session. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available afterwards. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you would like to ask a question, please type it in the questions window of GoToWebinar, and Alex will address as many questions as possible, time permitting. We also have a copy of our Dome9 Arc product brief, as well as IAM Safety, and 2 customer case studies that discuss some of the tools we will be going over today. Please feel free to download these documents at any time during the webinar. Without further ado, I will now pass the ball to Alex. Let's get started.
All right, thanks, Ellen. And hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us up today. Just to kind of set the stage for what we're going to be talking about today. First of all, if you guys have any problems with sound quality, please make sure to put it in the chat quickly so we can make sure to get that addressed. You never know how a GoToMeeting is going to behave on this day. To set the stage, though, for what we're actually going to be talking about and kind of how this webinar is going to go. What we're going to talk about first at a high level is just some of these challenges that we're seeing and trying to address within the cloud. What kind of vulnerabilities are being presented? what are the issues with all these different services and how they're all interacting together. And then from there, we're going to talk quickly about the high level of what Dome9 is doing to address that. And then from there, the majority of the time is going to be spent actually talking through those 4 things that that Thelen just mentioned. And we'll be jumping back and forth between slides, as well as the Dome9 UI, the AWS console, and some CLI to really kind of tie this all together so, so that you know what we're talking about here. So, first of all, the issues. The big issue that we have really seen within running workloads in the cloud is that the problems that are presented are different than we have seen historically from running workloads on premise. The notion of having this hardened perimeter where everything is nice and locked down doesn't really exist anymore. And instead, what we have is we have all of these different security groups that are talking together. And with these security groups, we really have the opportunity to create an extremely tight and secure environment by leveraging microsegmentation. But the unfortunate flip side of that we've really seen is that while you have the opportunity to have a perfectly configured environment, a lot of times just the complexities of maintaining an environment like this and actually keeping all of these configurations together and actually getting visibility into what all of these different security groups and rules are doing could be a huge challenge. And because of that, and because of this lack of a kind of hardened perimeter, what we can end up seeing is really accidental public exposure is no more than a single API call away. And again, this doesn't just revolve around security groups. You know, as Thelen mentioned again, the S3 bucket misconfiguration kind of situation has been a huge issue and all over the news lately. And as one person gets breached and all their data gets taken out of these misconfigured buckets, then all right, thanks Chris for letting me know. I will try to stay higher. As these buckets are misconfigured and data is being taken out of buckets, this isn't because of hacks, but just because of people not having the knowledge and visibility into what it takes to run a properly configured workload on the cloud. And so again, like we're talking about for the security groups, really exposure is no more than one missed API call away. And you know, in this particular case, the problem got so bad that AWS finally actually sent out a heads up to its customers, letting them know that we have buckets that are exposed and that they should probably lock those down so they don't become those next people on the news. And while that's great that they took those steps to give this extra visibility to their customers, you know, there was a lot of companies that had significant breaches before then, and there's a lot of other vulnerabilities that aren't getting that type of attention, where AWS is going to go out of its way and let you know that this is something that needs to be addressed. And so with that, we've got a lot of potential vulnerabilities that are a very short hop away as far as misconfigurations go. And the challenge with this is that it's not a one-time issue. You know, if we configure our environment to be secure when it's first spun up, that's great and that's a good start. But it's not enough. And this really needs to be an ongoing project that people are working on to really make sure that that every deployment is secure and every new person that is brought onto the team is you know, locked down to least privilege, and that they are aware of the repercussions of some of these permissions that they are given. And then on top of that, we really want to then take these controls and add even an extra layer of protection on top of them. And that's again what we're talking about today, where we're not just promoting kind of visibility and knowledge of what's going on within your environment, but then how do we add an extra layer of protection and some guardrails around what you're doing, so that you can really keep things locked down without having to actively manage it yourself on an ongoing basis. And so with that, where Dome9 fits into this is what we have, which is called the Dome9 Arc platform. And the Dome9 Arc stands for Assess, Remediate, and Control. And as I was talking about in the previous slide, this is really a full suite of products to really help you along your whole cloud lifecycle. It's not just about assessing it. If I tell you today that everything is okay, that's a great start again, but it's not enough. We would need to be able to find these issues and get visibility and understand exactly what my current state of my environment is. But then from there, I need to be able to remediate it. If I find an issue, I want to be able to fix it, and I want to fix it quickly to make sure that what I did has as little exposure as possible, and everything can have the most time being properly configured. And then from there, control. We've found this issue with Assess, we've remediated it, and then from there we want to keep it locked down so that we don't have to keep on going in and fixing the same things week in and week out because maybe someone either doesn't know exactly the repercussions of what they're doing, or even something malicious. And so within that Dome9 Arc, the way that this product is structured into three different modules. Those three modules are network security, compliance and governance, and then advanced IAM protection, or what we call IAM safety. So with that, today, the majority of the things we're going to be talking about are revolving around network security, but then at the end, we're going to be touching on IAM safety as well. All right. And then, so now, actually getting into this active remediation side of things and the functionality that we're going to be talking about. There are four different categories of features that we are going to be addressing today. There's tamper protection, region lock, dynamic access, and IAM safety. And what we'll see as we'll get into this is that there are kind of two different categories of functionality here. The first two are more around kind of set it and forget it, where we want to set up these guardrails and add some extra protection to my environment and then not really have to deal with it on an ongoing basis from there. The other side of that is dynamic access and IAM safety, which are more around things that we will be using on a more ongoing basis for just-in-time access to different services to kind of keep things locked down as much as possible while still being able to give you the controls that you need in order to do your job on a day-to-day basis. So with that, let's get into tamper protection. So what tamper protection is a way to lock down security group configurations. Again, if you're noticing a theme here, getting your security group and your environment properly configured is not just a one-time job. We want to get things locked down, but then on an ongoing basis, we need to make sure that everything is configured just the way we like it. And so I'll pop open the UI here so you can see actually how this is turned on. So within tamper protection, again, what we're doing is we're locking down configurations. And so what that means is let's say we have this particular security group in our environment. And here it's called App1 servers. I've got a handful of instances that are associated with this security group. And we have a bunch of rules that are taking in traffic from some security groups. And assuming this is in prod and this configuration is my golden standard, how do I lock it down? Well, what I can do here, as has been done already on the security group, is I can turn on tamper protection. And what tamper protection does is when it's enabled, it takes the baseline of the current state of this security group. And so in this case, when it's turned on or was turned on, Dome9 looked at this and said, okay, we have 443, 555, 8123, UDP 555, and 80 that are the ports that are set up in this security group, and its targets are just these other security groups shown here on the allowed sources. Now from here, after it was turned on, what we're going to be doing is pulling your account on an ongoing basis and comparing the current state of this security group to this baseline that we took. And what happens is that if we see a deviation from this baseline that we took, we're automatically going to detect that change. We're going to roll it back, and then we're going to log it in our audit trail as well, so that you can be alerted to the fact that someone is doing something that they probably weren't approved to be doing. And so that event would look something like this, where we said, hey, we had this security group, it was locked down, but we saw a new rule, and in this case, someone added in SSH and made it wide open. And this was what was rolled back. Additionally, over here, we can actually pull in some extra context from CloudTrail so that we can see, well, this person, in this case, it's our Lambda function called Tamper Monkey, was opened up this security group, and then we rolled it back as well. And so again, this is all around making sure that we keep things locked down just the way we like them. And so we don't see this being used as much in dev accounts, but in production, especially for for our customers that have very strict compliance type needs, this is a great way to really make sure that we're locking down our golden configurations, and that only changes that are approved are being applied. One of the questions that we get a lot with this is how we work with infrastructure as code. Hey, this tamper protection is a nice thought, but I'm actually making all of my security group changes via CloudFormation or Terraform, and if I push in a new template in my environment, how do I make that work where the second I push in my new template, Dome9 doesn't override all the security group settings on said template, because really that wouldn't be helping anybody here. And so for that, it's a good time to mention that the Dome9 is completely API driven, and that's really not just on information being presented to you, but also in actions being taken. And so for that, we've actually got a small little Python script here up on our GitHub. But it's basically just an example of an API call for you to be able to hit our API and therefore turn on and off tamper protection as needed straight from that API. So if we're pushing in new code from CloudFormation, what we can then do is hit the Dome9 API to turn off tamper protection for those security groups that will be affected. We can then push in that new template. And then after that template is done being deployed, we can then hit that API again to raise the shields back up, which will then take a new baseline of the current state of this environment, and everything will continue to be locked down going forward. All right. So from here, when we want to take this a step further, what we have is some functionality called region lock. And I call region lock kind of like a super tamper protection, because really the mechanism that we're using is similar. It's just the application that is different. And so what it is, it's all around locking down different regions that you don't want to be used. I'd say categorically what we're seeing from our customers is that they're really only running workloads in maybe 2, maybe 3 regions per account. And so with that, considering AWS is up to 14, 15, 16 regions nowadays, we end up having a multitude of other regions that should be sitting dormant, but aren't always that way. And so for that, what that means is that we have this potential vulnerability here where we have some regions that we don't want anything to be running in, but we don't actually have the visibility in order to really make sure that that is that way. Because And as we've seen from within AWS, because all of these views are split out by region, there can be something running in a region you never go to, and it can take a lot of time before you find out that there's actually something there that shouldn't be. So the way that this works, and the way that we turn on region lock, is by going into the count that we're trying to lock down, and then the region that that we want to control. And so in this case, I'm saying that I am not planning on running any workloads in Sao Paulo, and I want to keep it locked down. So I can turn it to region lock here, and what this does is it is going to lock down the configuration of these security groups. If anyone spins any new security groups up in this region, like tamper protection, they're going to be detected and they're going to be rolled back. But in this case, rolled back means that they're going to be zeroed out. And so if any person, for any reason, let's say spins up an EC2 instance that has a new security group, we're going to detect that security group, we're going to zero it out so that instance can't actually do anything. And then again, we're going to alert you as well on that, so that you can go in and you know, figure out what's been going on here and take those deeper remediation steps if needed. And so with this, for region lock, I'd say there's three main use cases that come to mind when we're talking about it. The first is probably the most obvious, which is something along the lines of compromised access keys. I was talking to a customer recently that had some access keys that were compromised, and what someone did is they went in and they went to an unused region of theirs, and they spun up a bunch of GPU instances to mine Bitcoin. And it took them about 2 weeks to identify it, and by that time they had racked up about an $80,000 bill with AWS that then they had to go and deal with. And you know, in that case, if they had something like region lock turned on, well, they would have been alerted about that immediately. Those you know, those instances that were running wouldn't have been able to send any data anywhere, and then they could have gone and been able to turn this off and start doing that deeper dive into why those access keys were compromised, really, you know, within a couple minutes. The second is much less nefarious, and that is just around locking down things to prevent against shadow IT, especially at bigger organizations. Really, what we see is that most times in some region, we will see a couple instances named something like Alex test delete me, and you know, they may be on, they may be off. But you know, if no one has any idea that people are running workloads in unapproved regions, then how can we do anything about it? And so if we have region lock turned on, again, those would be zeroed out, and then you can go and you know, inform that person that we shouldn't be running workloads in places that aren't approved. And then the last case that that really comes to mind for region lock is all around data sovereignty. What we've seen from some of our financial customers is that they have you know, very strict controls over which countries you know, can and can't have data and where this can be sent. And what region lock can be is a, you know, piece of a larger solution around making sure that this data stays where it's going to be. And if I have an account that should only be running you know, workloads in Frankfurt, well, let's really do our best here to make sure that that is the only place anything is running. And if, again, anything is created in an environment outside of that one, we want you to be alerted so that you can get in and really address this as needed. So, tamper protection and region lock, again, were more of the set it and forget it type of functionality, where we know what we want and we can set it, and then, you know, on an ongoing basis, there isn't a whole lot of maintenance or upkeep that really needs to be done, besides for, you know, putting region lock on your regions as they're created, or locking down tamper protection for new security groups as things change within your environment. But these next two features that we're going to be talking about are the other side of this, and these are these are things that are going to be used on a more ongoing basis for more kind of active protection and active controls within your environment. And so the first thing that we're talking about here is the thing we have, which is called dynamic access. And you know, as the slide mentions, what we've really seen is that there is a big issue in security group configurations as far as overexposure goes. You know, this can be because you know, our devs need to go in and do a lot of testing with different rules, or maybe, you know, our jump box needs to be open, you know, to our office's IP range in order to you know, give us this access, or it could just be you know, just tidiness. Someone needs to go in and make a change to a particular security group into some instances, but once they're finished with their work, they're not actually going back and cleaning up after themselves. However nice it would be if everyone did it, you know, I'd say a lot of our environments would argue against it. And so what dynamic access is a way to open up ports on security groups, but for a limited amount of time. So what it's going to be is it's a time-based access lease where we're going to open up a port on a security group, but again, it's only for a finite amount of time, and it's also for as small of a scope of an IP address as possible. So let's get back into the UI and show how this actually looks. So in this case, for dynamic access, in this example, we're saying that we have a security group here in this region, and both of these rules, both these ports, port 80 and port 22, are locked down, and no one can get to them. And in this case, we can actually even show it because there's a little website running on it. So I try to load up the website. No one can get to it because it is locked down and that port is closed. Again, from a security standpoint, this is fantastic. But if I need to get in and I need to get to that website, or I need to SSH to that instance, how do I then go and open this up so that I can you know, do the work that I need to do? And so for that, what I can do is I can acquire an access lease. And so when I click on Get Access here, what Dome9 does is it takes a look at my current IP, and it adds a rule in straight to AWS that opens up port 80 just to my IP address, but it's only going to do it for an hour. And so what that means is that for right now, I've got access and I can get in, and I've got my you know, little Dome9 example page here. But then after an hour, if I try to come back to this, I'm not going to be able to get back to the site because that lease is going to expire, that rule is going to be cleaned up, and everything is going to be just as locked down as it was before. And so this is a great way to not only stay more secure, but then also just keep things tidy. We don't need to have a bunch of different rules floating around our security group in order to get the access that I need. Additionally, we've got a kind of example just for 22, just to kind of get the gears turning for you guys. If I try to SSH to this particular instance right now, I can't. But if I come here and I get a lease instead for port 22, actually, I'll show you guys first. We can see that in this case, SSH is open, again, to my IP. And now when I come in here, I can SSH to this box and everything is good. And so as I mentioned, the applications for some functionality like dynamic access are obviously extremely varied because we're talking about ports and security groups, which controls the majority of the things that we're talking about within AWS. But with that, there's a couple different main functionalities that I have, or main use cases that I've seen our customers using this for. The first is for locking down jump boxes and bastion hosts further than they might be normally. You know, for that, if someone, you know, if we have a jump box, we don't want it to be any more exposed than it needs to be. But at the same time, obviously, we're going to need those ports to be open so people can get in and do the work they need to. and so we could use that, you know, that port 22 kind of switch in order to be able to get in and do our work. And the way we can acquire a lease here is we can do it right from here. I can also send a lease to someone else if, let's say, I have someone who is on site for the week that needs access to, you know, a particular set of services, and then again after that person's gone, that lease will expire and everything will go back to normal. We have a Chrome extension up here, which can be very handy if there is a particular set of ports you're using on a frequent basis. And then lastly, again, everything here is API driven. And so if there is a need for you to tie a dynamic access lease somewhere into, you know, into some like automation or deployments to, you know, maybe give you access to some boxes after a rollout, but then afterwards close it out, you know, all those different options are available. The second use case that we're seeing a lot is around what we call promoting harmony in between devs and security teams. A lot of times what we've seen from dev teams is that they, you know, they have a lot of testing they need to do. And for developing their different applications, they really want as wide of a berth of rules and access as possible so that they, you know, have all of the permissions they need in order to, you know, quickly develop their applications. And that's fine from a dev standpoint, but what we've seen a lot of times is that the security team side of this says, hey, I know that you need to develop your applications, but guys, these rules are too permissive, and every time you ask me to add a new one onto our security groups, they're not being cleaned up. And you end up with a lot of kind of back and forth between these two teams as they're both, you know, trying to do their jobs. And Dynamic Access has a great opportunity to help out with a use case like that, because you know, what we can do is we can say, hey, dev team, let's use Dynamic Access. And with this, we can open up the ports that you need and for the duration that you need, but we're going to keep them as scoped down as possible. And then again, once you're done with your testing, these leases are going to expire automatically. You don't need to do anything in order to clean them up. And therefore, the security team's happy because we're as scoped down as possible, even in a dev environment. And then they don't need to do anything afterwards or go and you know, scrub down all of these rules at the end of the quarter when they're doing a, you know, firewall type assessment. Everything is taken care of for them on the back end. And again, just like these leases and just like the Tamper Protection, this is it's all logged in our audit trail as well, so that you can see who is doing what and you know, what ports are being up by who and when. So the last kind of piece of Dome9 functionality that that I'm planning on addressing with you guys today is similar to Dynamic Access in the way that we're doing a time-based access lease to something. But the difference becomes then what it is that we're actually protecting. Obviously, within Dynamic Access, we are locking down ports and security groups and the networking side of things. But within IAM Safety, as the name might allude to, we are instead locking down IAM permissions. You know, what we're seeing time and time again is that we have a lot of admins that have a lot of different permissions, and even if we are following the least privilege model, you're still going to have people that need to have you know, a decent amount of permissions just to do their job, and you know, from there, a lot of these permissions that are, you know, listed within AWS that our users have, they're very dramatic and significant changes that can be made, and a lot of times they're irrevocable as well. And so the question then becomes, how do we add a kind of a backstop and an extra layer of protection on top of whatever it is that you're doing for IAM, just to really make sure that we have things as locked down as possible. And instead of showing you the slide, we'll jump back again. All right. So the way I'm going to do this here is I'm going to talk a little bit of theory about how dynamic access is set up and what we're actually going to be doing. And then we'll get into the AWS side of things so that you can see how this actually looks in the wild, because seeing how this is implemented, I think, is much more interesting than just sitting here on this. But how do we set this up and how does it work? So as I said, what we're really trying to lock down and add more protection to is our most sensitive permissions and actions, and especially those ones that are irrevocable within our environment. And so a lot of times when we're seeing people implement IAM Safety, that can be locking down changes to IAM, it can be changes to KMS, things like terminating instances, deleting S3 buckets, killing off RDS, all of these kinds of things that are significant, and except for terminating EC2 instances, might not be happening very often. And so on the Dome9 side, what we're going to do is we're going to build out a policy that that defines these different services that we are trying to lock down, and we're going to turn it into a big deny policy. And then from here, once we have decided what should be locked down and we've built out this policy, it's going to be applied to the users and or roles that that we need to add some extra protection to. And so the way this works is because we have this deny policy that is then being applied, let's say, to users, because within AWS, explicit denies always override allows, we're removing these permissions from our users, even if they had them already explicitly defined within their environment. Let's get back over to the console here. So let's say in this case that that I'm here in my environment and I'm an administrator and I can do everything. But then once we were going through our Dome9 setup and looking at it, what our most sensitive services or actions are, we really decided that that DNS is a very sensitive service for us, and we wanted to add this extra layer of protection on top of it. So we set it up in our deny policy. It was applied to my user, and now when I go and I try to make changes within Route 53, I can't, because that deny policy is removing these permissions that I used to have. And so from a security standpoint, this is fantastic, because if I want things to be locked down further and I want to add this extra layer of protection on top of whatever whatever services I'm trying to lock down, that's been accomplished. But then the question becomes, if I am here for a valid reason and I need to actually be able to get in and make some changes, how do I get these permissions back? And so for that, what we have is a Dome9 app, and this app is for Android as well as iOS. And this is where that similarity to dynamic access comes in, because what I did is I clicked this button and then opened up an authorization window. And this window is only open for 15 minutes by default. And what that did on the back end is it dropped that deny off of my account. So whereas I was my admin and then I was restricted, so I couldn't make any changes to things like IAM or Route 53, now that I've acquired this lease, the deny is dropped off my account and I have all my permissions back that I used to. I didn't gain any new ones, I just got back the things that Dome9 had locked down. And so from here, now we come over to the AWS side. I can go and I can refresh, and now I've got all my permissions back, and I can get in and I can do all these changes that I need to do. And now from here, if I do nothing, after 15 minutes, this lease is going to expire and my permissions are going to drop back down to the level they were at. But then I can also go and proactively kill off this lease if I'm finished doing, finished doing my work and want to be kind of extra security conscious. And so with this, there are two main use cases that we see for IAM Safety, and they kind of fall into two different categories, and that's whether or not we're protecting against outside threats or protecting against ourselves. The original reason that this functionality was created was for a code spaces type of event where your administrative privileges have been compromised and we have someone with malicious intent and admin rights in one of our important accounts, and we want to prevent them from torpedoing our business. And in this case, if we had locked down, S3 or IAM, then even if someone has these, they have my access keys, they can't get in and they can't do those most devastating changes to my environment because they don't also have that Dome9 app. And the second reason and the second use case that that we're really seeing for this IAM safety, again, is more around protecting yourself. And what that means is what we're really seeing is that we have these admins that have, again, a lot of permissions, and instead of protecting against outside threats, I want to protect against accidents for things I do myself. And so we can use this IAM safety kind of like a sudo for AWS, where within just my day-to-day, what are those things I could do that maybe I want to have an extra gut check on before I do it. And so this can, again, be all those changes that I was talking about previously. We're also seeing some of our users using this to lock down like STS assume role, so that before I maybe change my role, assume a role into like a production account, that's where IAM safety is locked down. Kind of like dynamic access, the use cases on a tool like this are very widespread because there's so many different services and so many different ways that you all can architect your permissions to keep things locked down. But the fundamental part of it is that we're locking down sensitive permissions so that we can add an extra layer of protection and then only give them back on a time-based access lease. All right, so those are the four things that that I really wanted to cover today, and obviously we could spend much more time talking about all the functionality within Dome9. The active remediation and controls that we were talking about today are currently just for AWS, but they're coming shortly for Azure and Google as well. But then from there, Dome9 has a lot more than just this active remediation, and there are a lot of other visibility and compliance type pieces that can really give you this this full suite of coverage into giving you better visibility and control over what is going on within your cloud environments.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Alex. Now that we're at the end of our webinar, it looks like we've received a few questions. The first one is, what kind of permissions do we need to give Dome9 write functionality?
Great question. All right. So with that, for giving Dome9 permissions, we really try to walk the line as much as possible between having enough permissions to actually be able to make changes that are helpful and actually impactful. But at the same time, we want to keep it as scoped down as possible because any write permissions that you give to any third party are significant and should absolutely be thoroughly vetted. And so in this case, for all the functionality that we talked about today, besides for IAM Safety, which has a separate policy, this is all that we need, which is really, as you can see, just around modifying security group permissions, because that's the majority of what we were talking about today.
Great. Let's see, second question. Can I bring on an account in read-only and later switch to read-write?
Yes. So the way this works and the way that Dome9 hooks into your environment is via a cross-account role. And so with that, when we bring a new account on in read-only, I bring a new account on read-only, there are two policies that are attached. There's the security audit policy, which is a managed policy from AWS, and then there is the read-only policy. if you want to get in, try out Dome9, and then maybe test the waters at a later point in time for read-write, all that you have to do for that read-write functionality is add this policy into your environment and then attach it to that Dome9 role.
Right. Third question, do I have to put my whole account in write, or can I split up what's controlled?
You can split up what's controlled. So I'd say the way that I've been seeing kind of the industry shifting is that a lot of times we are breaking up controls based on environment. So we have a production account and then a dev account and all of that. But that's not always the case, and so sometimes we need to be able to get in and get more granular. And so what we can do is within any of these different regions, we can go in and actually change our security group tamper protection controls on a one-by-one basis. And so if I want my whole region locked down, I can go to select all. If I go to all monitor, obviously that does the opposite. Or I can get in and change these all as I please to really kind of give that fine-tuned control over what's going on.
Great, and it looks like we have one more question. It's regarding Azure. When is Dome9 expecting to have Azure capability?
Yeah, so so it's an ongoing project, as you can imagine. Within that, let me see, it should be on here. I'm not sure if any of these are. So we can actually currently get in and make changes to Azure security groups, just like we can make changes to AWS security groups currently. And that was actually just released, I think, within the past week or two. Now that we've got the ability to manage Azure on a read-write basis, now we're working on adding in some of those extra functionalities and that active protection that we were talking about. So I believe that tamper protection is coming, gosh, I'd like to say within the month. And then from there, those other functionalities will be coming in subsequent releases. If you'd like to, you can leave your email address, and I can make sure to kind of keep you notified as those functionalities are released and or in beta.
Great. All right, well, that concludes the Q&A of our webinar today. Thank you, Alex. All right, everyone, this concludes today's webinar. Thank you for attending. If you have any further questions on the information presented today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via the email address q&anda@dome9.com. I have a few final notes. If you enjoyed the webinar presented today and would like to experience the Dome9 Arc platform for yourself, we are offering a 14-day free trial. Please visit our website at www.dome9.com and click on the Get Started button on our homepage. Just register and a representative from Dome9 will contact you to activate your free trial. Additionally, if you liked the webinar today and would like to hear more about the multi-cloud security solutions Dome9 provides, please visit the resources page on our website and sign up for several of our upcoming webinars, or go to www.dome9.com/webinars. If there's a topic you would like us to discuss, please contact us through our website and let us know. With that, we thank you for your time today and hope you found the content informative. This now concludes the Dome9 webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody, for your time.